Well, it's good to have everybody here this evening. I had to start the stream back there, so it takes a second to get up here after we do that. And it's appropriate to have to be online streaming because we're going to talk about online things tonight. And I mention this from time to time when I'm in on Wednesday nights, and even on Sunday nights. And I know a lot of you probably wonder, why do I talk about this topic so much? And it's because this is what I work in. I work in technology. I work for a company in their IT department. And I've done that for a long time. And I see a lot of different things happen. I see the technology change over the years. And I hear a lot of the questions people have on a day to day basis. People who are not as technical, but still work in the company in other positions, and the things that they ask and the things they're worried about, things they're concerned about. And I think it's something we should be concerned about because it's, our devices that we have sort of open a door to all sorts of stuff in the world. And we need to keep that in mind as we use them and as we interact with stuff that is out there all over the place, coming at us all the time. So the idea is, how do we live in a technical world without becoming worldly? And how do we use these things as tools that they're meant to be, and not let them sort of change us? And of course, 40 years ago, we probably would have said the same thing about television. And, before that, radio, before that, newspapers. How do these messages get to us? We absorb them, and how do we let them change us? What do we learn from them? And what negative things can they do to us? And the scripture that I used for this tonight was Romans 12, 1 through 2, and divided into three parts. And the first part sort of is a what to do. And in Romans 12:1, it says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies in a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And then the first part of verse 2 tells us what not to do. Do not be conformed to this world. And then the third part says, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And I think this, the renewing of the mind, and I think we talked about it a few weeks ago when I was up here, this idea of constantly learning, constantly thinking about what we're doing, studying the Bible, coming to church, hearing these lessons. And if we don't use it, we lose it. And if we kind of put it in the back of our mind and we let other messages sort of take over for us, those messages will actually make us drift in that direction. And I think you can see, if you watch the news and you're just aware of what's going on politically in the world, how much everything has changed in our country as this technology has taken off and sort of opened these doors to sort of different ways of thinking. Very small groups of people have extremely loud voices when they're coming through our phones and our other devices. And, we can let that happen, or we can understand that maybe what we're hearing is not all good. So when we kind of look, I found this graphic on the internet, and the internet, of course, where we find everything these days. But it's sort of technology. It's very kind of hard to read it a little bit because it's kind of small. But it's technology that came out through generations, and then how we used it as we went along through generations. And of course, we just talked about the radio and the television. The newspaper is a little further back, not on here. But this one kind of missed it. At the very end, it said that the current generation will be using virtual reality a lot. And we know that the key technology now is AI, which is artificial intelligence, which is really just a big computer with a lot of data that can sort of talk to you like a human being, and it's easier to ask questions to. I mean, that's how you just break it all down. You can ask it to do just about anything, and it will do it. And the struggle we have at work is making sure people don't share confidential information with AI. And that is getting harder and harder and harder, because they'll say, hey, analyze the spreadsheet for me. I don't want to do the work myself. Take my data, and you've given them your company sales records. You've given them whatever confidential data you have. And they put that into their database, and That will be used further down the line. That's how AI works. But I think the real key in all of this is that in 2001, that was the invention of the iPod. And that is Apple, of course, and Steve Jobs and his desire to make technology something that was mainstream. And really, when you think about it, really before the late 90s, 98, 99, technology was more for hobbyists and for people who, wanted to be involved in that, wanted to learn about it, but it was not really mainstream. And now we walk around with it. We all have it because Steve Jobs took the difficulty out of it. He hid everything behind nice, pretty icons, and you just tap what you want to do, and you don't have to remember commands anymore. When I was growing up, if you wanted to use a computer, you had a book this big, and it was full of commands, and you had to command the computer what to do. And not a lot of people did it. And you wouldn't think it. I didn't really have any interest in computers growing up. We did have one at the house, but I really didn't use one much until I got to college, and it was a very prehistoric compared to what we have today. Very prehistoric, and even bigger when we look at this. When we look at this diagram up here, 2004 is the premiere of Facebook, and it was limited only to college students in 2004, and in 2005 we got YouTube. So we had more reasons to turn to the internet and to turn to our devices. And, really at this time, we were still having to use computers for this. We didn't have devices that would really tap into the internet. In 2006, we got Facebook for everybody. And he opened it up because he knew there was money to be made, and he made a lot of money. And then we got Twitter, of course, which we now call X, and that was in 2006. And then the big one, the iPhone, in 2007. And that's what opened the door to everything. And of course, Steve Jobs' original idea was we would only have a few little applications on the iPhone. I don't think he envisioned everything that would happen. He thought it would be a music player and a few other things, and now it's everything. And we have so much power in these little devices that it would take rooms full of computers to do that even 25 years ago. And now we have it in our pocket, basically. And I think the real lesson when we look at this and how it applies to what we're going to talk about today, like my childhood growing up in the 80s and a little bit of the early 90s, was much different than my father's childhood because the technology was just not there for us. We still picked up the phone and had to dial it with a dial, and we still only had a few channels to watch on TV. And we didn't have the ability to message each other. If you wanted to communicate with me, you had to send me a letter or track me down on the phone when I happened to be home. And maybe people had an answering machine, maybe they didn't. And for people born until about 1987, 1988, that's the life that they grew up in, a life without constantly being online. And when I say constantly being online, I talk about, the device in your pocket. I can only imagine how many of us are online connected right now, sitting in this room. Probably the majority of us have a device, and we are connected to the internet right now. And of course, this is going out over the internet, something we could have never done 10 years ago in this easy manner that we do now. Companies could do it if they paid a lot of money. Now anybody can do it. So when you think about that, being born just up to the late 80s, you had a childhood not different from somebody who was born in the 20s or 30s. That's the big change that has happened just in the last few years. And it has just accelerated. And now we don't really know what life's like without it. It's really hard to believe that at one time we didn't have it. It makes me sound ancient. And so for the younger folks in here, so we're in this brand new world, and the world is conforming us, and we are allowing it to do so, and we're even pursuing it. We want that information all the time. I can pull up my phone right now and tell you who's winning the Auburn game right now. I would assume it's Auburn, but I don't know. They were ahead when I left. But it's right here on my. In fact, I could not just pull it up and tell you the score. I could actually pull up the game on YouTube TV right here, and we could watch it right here. I could put it up on the microphone. We could all hear it because that's what technology has given us, that ability to be that connected all the time. Well, how do they do this to us? How do they give us this, this new world that we live in? And one word, content. It's like everything all the time, everywhere you are, anything you want to look up and learn. It is everything. It is absolutely everything. And it is this endless volume of content that is available. And a lot of people call it going down the rabbit hole. They'll look up one thing and then 4 hours later they're still on their phone scrolling through things, and because it just takes you down this path. And there's this thing called the fear of missing out. A lot of people call it FOMO. If I don't have that device, if somebody messages me while I'm driving somewhere, maybe I won't know what happened. I can't even drive. I got to pull it, and now I'm swerving all over the road. And you see people doing that. I know probably all of us have seen that, where they're just kind of drifting. You can see the phone up on the steering wheel, and they're trying to thumb the phone because they think they can do that. Can't even put it down to drive. And we're bombarded with these messages that kind of program us into this cycle of intake. I've got to have the content, and I have to react to the content. So, one post may make us feel like this. If I'm scrolling through my phone, I'm going to feel funny, and then I'm really going to laugh at something. Something's really going to be funny. And then something sad. Someone's going to post something sad. If I'm looking at Facebook, people are posting all of their personal not information, but their personal thoughts, things going on in their lives. And maybe something really, really funny is going to come up. Hey, now I'm happy again. And now here's something about politics, and now I'm mad, and, then I'm funny again, and I'm sad again, and here's something just shocking, like that Tennessee score earlier. I apologize to you Tennessee fans, that was terrible. And then sad again, another Tennessee icon, I guess. And I don't even know what this guy is, and then you don't even know what to think. And now I'm hungry because someone's posted their dinner, and I'm not eating. And then finally, you're just overwhelmed by it all. And this is what people are doing all the time. They're just going from one idea to the next all the time. And people are always talking at us. And the question I have, is it healthy to go through all the emotions all the time? What does that do to us? When I was over at the school, when the kids were at school and I would travel on trips with the kids, you could definitely see a difference in how the kids of the I guess they were born around 9/11. Our kids were born one right after 9/11 and one the following year. And that was the age of the kids that were over here. When I was over there chaperoning and working with the school, it seemed like all the time for a while. And you could just definitely see a difference, especially how emotional the teenagers were and how seriously they took things and how hard life seemed to be. And we went on a trip where we went to a camp for a few days called a leadership camp. And they would have these sessions where they would get up and talk about these things, these very deep things they were going through. And everything was just, it was at a level of 100 as opposed to, it was just so, it was shocking. It was shocking to me. And I think what it was is, you just get tied up in all of this. You're just bombarded all the time. And we had to have sessions where weren't allowed to have your devices. And you could tell that was just, oh my goodness. And of course, we were out in the woods where it wasn't a good signal in the first place. So that was difficult, that you're pulling them away from this constant thing. But don't think that it's just teenagers going through that. It's everybody. I know adults that are as addicted to them as anybody else. And you go to a restaurant, you can go to Demos's, and you can look around and see, people around my age, couples, they aren't not even talking to each other. They're looking down at their phones the entire meal. Maybe they might look up every once in a while, and they might be communicating back and forth, sending each other things, but who knows? But that is the world we live in. So, it begs to ask the question, how can we absorb all the ups and downs of the strangers spread across this planet and deal with our own problems and our own things that we go through, our own ups and downs of life? We're carrying all this extra baggage. And what are we going to do with all this extra baggage? And how do we work through our own problems when I'm also thinking about whoever? Like when you go to Facebook and it's a constant stream of, my pet passed away today. or so and so is in the hospital. Somebody that I might have gone to high school with that I haven't seen in 35 years. It's their problem. Then the next person, and then the next person. Most of the time people don't go to social media and post the happy things that happen. Sometimes they do if they really want to kind of rub it in. Like look at me in Italy, woo, stuff like that. But and how much is that good for you too? Because you're at work and there they are in over in Italy. And that brings up another idea. Many of the people on social media, they're horn tutors, what I call it. In Matthew 6:1-2, it says, "Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward." And there's a lot of people who are, just primarily share to toot their own horn. Look at me. Look at what I'm doing. And, you kind of hide the regular stuff of daily life, and their lives look perfect. And them sitting there going, I'm not perfect. What do I need to change? What do I need to do that's different? And that's not healthy. So why do we let this happen? The more that we let it happen, the more it changes us, and then it eventually consumes us. And like I said, it can happen at any age. I have trouble. I'll sit there at night and pull up the device, the iPad, and just start scrolling. And then it's bedtime all of a sudden. It's like, didn't I just sit down? Wasn't it just 6 o'clock? And now it's bedtime. And I've been looking at basketball scores or whatever for 3 hours, or watching what happened in the NBA, and it just goes on and on and on. So we're letting it happen because, for one, it's easy. Matthew 7:13, we know this one. It says, "Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it. Because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way that leads to life, and there are few who find it." The wide gate is the easy gate. It's just easy. It's easy to just sit there and scroll your night away, or scroll your dinner away, or wherever you happen to be. It's just easy because the machine out there will continue to provide you with things to look at, things that kind of pique your interest, and you're on the happy sad thing going, and that will, all of a sudden, there's a wasted night. Like I said, it's entertaining. You can see this funny clip, and if you like this funny clip, it'll provide you with 1,000 more funny clips just like that funny clip that you like. You like seeing corgis? Well, boom, now you're going to see all corgis, because that's my feed is full of corgis, owls, whatever I have looked at. It will instantly boom. You think a possum's cute? 1,000 possums. They're going to be in your feed before you know it. It's also not work. Wouldn't I rather look at a cute possum than get up and empty the dishwasher? I would. So those dishes will just stay in that dishwasher. So it's a distraction from the things that we need to do, the things that we want to be distracted from. It can be a distraction from the serious things going on in our lives too. Why deal with this problem that I have when I can watch these funny corgi videos, or I can catch up on what Charles Barkley said about the game? I just watch Charles, and he's funny and takes my mind off of whatever I have to do. And then there's the promise we'll never be bored again. That is a promise that we've been given many times over the years. I think television promised us that. And for a while, I guess it was sort of right. When we only had 3 channels, millions of people watch those 3 channels. Now we have thousands of channels, and it's like, it's so spread out because everybody's watching their own thing. There's an audience for everybody. They've got us all watching stuff, but we're all watching different things. And if you want to binge watch this show or watch this show, now you've got to watch 12 episodes of that. And my friends only watch Severance, so now I got to watch all of Severance. Or my friends watch this, my friends watch that. So how do you keep up with it all? And as long as you're paying for the service, as long as you're paying for Apple TV, they don't care, because now you got to pay for Netflix to keep up with those shows, and pay for Peacock and to watch that NFL game, because that's exclusive now. Can't watch that game on regular TV anymore. They got me paying to watch that game. So there's so many impacts of technology. Anything that distracts us from what we should be doing and how we should be living as a Christian is dangerous. So this levels it up a little bit. 1 John 2:15-17 says, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it, and he who does the will of God abides forever." And we're talking about people who get so tied up in these things. And it could be anything. It doesn't have to be technology. It could be anything. Any hobby, anything that just distracts them completely from how they should be living and things they should be doing. It can be addictions to anything. There's so many things out there that can be turned into an addiction. And I think though what this cycle does, this cycle that happens on my phone, it preps me more for addictive behavior because it's an addiction in itself, really. So it's something else I have to watch for. Something else I have to do. I can't let that program the way my brain thinks. I've always got to be absorbing something. I've always got to be distracted by something. So entertainment is great and it is wonderful. And I love watching NBA on TNT as much as anybody else. Charles and Shaq and all of them, I love them. They're great. I think they're fantastic. I don't need to watch them 24 hours a day. If Shaq came up with his own network, I better not be watching that 24 hours a day. That's a bad thing. Psalm 119:37 says, "Turn away my eyes from looking at worthless things and revive me in your way." It's sort of knowing, when should I put on the brakes? When should I put down the iPad? When should I turn off the TV? When should I stop doing whatever this hobby is? It's taking me out of what I should be doing, or this distraction I have. But the big question is, what if you can't turn away? There is so much pressure to stay in the loop. I can't remember, a few months ago, somebody famous and important had died. And I don't remember now. I guess they were famous, celebrity. So I don't know how important they were, but somebody texted, or maybe, no, I think they said it on a conference call. We were on a conference call and they were like, "Oh, did you know so-and-so died?" And I didn't, because I don't have notifications on my phone for any of those those social media apps. So no, I didn't know that. And I thought to myself, wow, how weird to not instantly get that notification. It was almost like freeing. I didn't have to know that. It didn't impact me in any way. I think it was the Gene Hackman thing. I think that came up on a call or something. Somebody said something about that. And you see how they've driven that into the ground, how they have to know every single detail. And why? Is because it gets ratings. Let's get ratings off of this poor, terrible situation. But it's understandable if we can't just turn away from it, because it goes with us all over the place. Like I said, it's in our pockets now. It's not in a computer that I have to go turn on. The newspaper only came out twice a day. We got one in the morning, one in the evening back in the olden days, and the TV, if you wanted to know the news, you had to turn it on at a certain time every day. There was no 24-hour news channel, stuff like that. But now we have this ability to be online all the time. And one thing that has trained us to be online all the time is the fact that this technology has taken over everything. So if I want to go read a book and distract myself, I don't have to do that anymore, because this phone is now my book reader, and it has become my record player, and it has become my television. I don't have to go to the mailbox, because it has become, my mailbox. It's where I get all of my mail. I don't need a camera anymore, because it's now my camera. So see, I grabbed for 5 different things that used to I had devices for, or I still get junk in the mail, but not much that's worth anything. If I want to play a game, I don't need a board game anymore. All thousands of games are on my phone. I can play a game. I can play a game with somebody else, not even pick up the phone and call them. I can play a game with my friend up in Ohio, and I can say, "Hey, you want to play a game on here?" And then we can play a game back and forth. We don't even see each other, but the things move back and forth. That's what we want to do. Poor Sears. We used to have Sears. We used to have stores like this. Don't have to go to the store anymore, because my phone is now my store. I don't have to do that anymore. And even work. Here's our severance guys. They're at work. They got a cubicle and everything. I work at home. I've worked at home for years, and you can work from anywhere now, which is a great benefit to the companies, because they can call you anywhere just about, and you can get online. In fact, right now on my phone, I have software. I could connect to the system, and I could fix things right here from my phone if I wanted that little tiny print, which is getting harder for me to see, but you can do it if that's what you need to do. So they have made it where we can do everything in the device. Why do we need to do anything else anymore? So there's a lot of good in technology, but like we know, too much of a good thing can make us sick. Proverbs 25:16 says, "Have you found honey? Eat only as much as you need, lest you be filled with it and vomit." Some people just can't stop consuming it. They can't stop eating it, and they can't stop taking in the technology. And you know, why not stay up at midnight? You've watched the games you want to watch, the football games. Why not watch one on the West Coast too? It's available to me. Two teams I've never heard of, but it's more football. I can stay up, I can watch football 14, 15 hours a day if that's what I want to do. So it's all available to me, but too much of a good thing is not good for me. And we need to remember that the people on the other end of these things, they're doing it for money. Mark Zuckerberg's not doing all this for the kindness of his heart. He's doing it because he wants clicks and dollars and even a few cents here or there. You could say, well, if I click something right now, that's worth a tenth of a penny to somebody. But you're talking millions and millions of clicks. So somebody's making a decent amount of money. 1 Timothy 6, starting in verse 6, says, "Now godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it's certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows." There's a danger on the internet. They'll just do anything to get a click. I know that there's this group of folks, especially with this bad weather coming. I call them the weather bros. They're on YouTube, and boy, they love to scare you to death. And they'll have big flashy, this big graphic that say, "Here it comes," and this big red bullseye right on your house, and with a picture of a tornado, like it's coming towards your house. And these guys, they make money, and they're on there through all these severe weather outbreaks, trying to scare you to death. And in certain places, yes, there'll be bad weather tonight. We know there's bad weather coming. There's bad weather coming Wednesday, but these folks make money off of that sort of, spurring you into action, working on your emotions, and they're doing it for money. And we have to watch that we don't get pulled into that, because a lot of that is misinformation. And it gets to the point where eventually people stop paying attention. So when it does actually come over the hill, they have no idea it's coming, because they stopped watching the weather, because they missed it so many times. It's not going to happen to me, and then it happens to them. So we have to be very careful to know that the people on the other end are not always, and they're not even always who they say they are. To be quite honest, a lot of people, scammers, everything else. Not only do we walk around with these devices, but we have a direct connection to scammers all over the world. And they'll text us and say, "Guess what? You didn't pay your toll somewhere 50,000 miles away, and you owe us all this toll money." And of course, it's a scam. And if you click that link, they can have all the passwords on your phone in 2 seconds before you can even do anything about it. Now they can get in your bank account. Now they can control your phone. So maybe they're controlling these lights. Maybe they want me to stop talking. I don't know. We better be careful, because we're streaming this on the internet. There could be one watching right now. Who knows? The final idea I have tonight, what we focus on, is where our heart will be. And in Matthew 6, starting in verse 21, it says, For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So if we invest so much of our time and our mindset into any of this stuff, a stream of, who knows, somebody we follow on Instagram, some topic we really enjoy on some of these devices, just anything out there like that. If my mind is with somebody that's thousands of miles away and what they're doing in their life, how is that impacting my life? So we have to be able to maintain our focus here while enjoying the fruits of these tools, but not letting them take our lives over and distract us from what the work is that we should be doing here. Continuing in verse 22, it says, "The lamp of the body is the eye. And therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. And therefore the light that is in you is darkness. How great is that darkness?" And all this stuff we see with our eyes. We're looking and scrolling, whatever device that might be, whatever interest that has taken, over our minds and distracted us into always pursuing that. And like I said, it can be anything. I know I get up here and I talk a lot about this one topic, but it can be anything. It can be anything that we get tied up in that is serving as a distraction for us and something that we need to watch out for and stay healthy about. And I think that there's more and more attention to this topic as we move forward in the 2020s here that we're in, because this technology is moving like lightning. And the AI, I was reading something the other day that there's a AI out there that a couple of years ago could barely complete just a basic test. And recently, an AI actually passed the bar in a state and could be a lawyer and did it in like 10 minutes. That's scary. And that's what we're up against out there. The power of these tools is immense. And they could use that power to fool us into think we're talking to somebody. Maybe one of our own friends, maybe take my voice tonight from this recording online and sample it and call up one of my kids and say whatever they want to say to them with my voice. They could do that if I was important enough and they decided to do that. They could even make a picture of me from the video we're streaming to the internet if they wanted to do that. Video of me saying those things. So we've got to be very, very careful how we look at this stuff moving forward. Now, I know a lot of this stuff tonight was more of a warning than a how do I apply this to my life, and how do I make my life better? How do I be a better Christian in all of this? But I think that the key thing here is not letting it distract us and away from the things that we should be doing. And there's a lot of ideologies out on the internet that will try to pull us away from what we learn here in this place. And we need to be very careful of that. And you may say, well, that would never happen to me. But you really don't know. I know, and I can't say any detail about it. It's nobody you would know, but it's somebody I know that has been pulled into something that another church that teaches wrong things. And somebody I never would have thought. And this is nobody in my family, nobody that, this is through something else completely different. But another friend told me about it, said, yeah, so and so's going over whatever, and they're just buried in that. And I was like, what? And it happened after COVID, I guess, and they just started reading all this stuff online, and they're just pulled in this totally wrong direction with misinformation about God and about being a Christian. Now, how serious is that? I mean, it's incredibly serious. And will that person ever get pulled out of that? And it's to the point that it's caused a fracture in their own family. That's the worst part. So now you have those in the family that are trying to do the right thing, and you have this person who's now off in this misinformation. And it comes from stuff like this. It only takes a little bit to get you off the wrong track, and then you're gone. So, we need to be watchful of the people we care about and stuff like this, because it can turn into something very serious if we're not careful. Hopefully this has been somewhat valuable tonight. Some of it has been. And if you do have need of the invitation, please come forward now while we stand and sing the song that's been selected.